This video is one of a 4-part mini-series by author, speaker, and research analyst Ray Yungen. This was recorded in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and Ray is joined by his friends Al and Nancy, and they're discussing the topic of the Aquarian Conspiracy and what this book by Marilyn Ferguson means and entails in light of the New Age occult explosion that is canvassing the globe in our age. There are other videos in this series which we encourage you to watch so that you get a full grasp and understanding of what Ray is discussing. And please note that Ray is not promoting the occult techniques of meditation, yoga, energy healing, Reiki, and many other occult practices. Ray is actually examining them in light of the Word of God, the Bible, and giving a sober warning throughout.
Well, Al, you're going to bring a kind of a personal component to this next talk, which is on energy healing and Reiki. It's another thing that has become extremely popular in the Western world. And there's an overall, as I just said, there's an overall term called energy healing. But then there's another term, it's kind of like brand names. There's, many different types of automobiles, but there's specific kinds of, or brands of automobiles. So energy healing encompasses the entire spectrum, but there's different names for different practices, but they're all basically the same. But we're going to look at here is something called Reiki. And you said something that you have a family member that has become somehow involved with Reiki. Could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, my own mother, I guess it's probably about 10 years back at least, that she mentioned that she practices Reiki.
Oh, she practices?
Yeah, but to what degree she's into it, I don't know.
Well, she actually practices it, right? Yeah. She doesn't just go to Reiki channelers.
I think she got books on it and decided to get into it.
Mm-hmm. So she was initiated into it.
I'm not really sure how.
But she does practice it.
Yeah.
Well, to practice it, you have to be initiated into it. It's not something like learning how to bake a cake or something like that. You go to a Reiki master. There's 3 different levels. The first level is you can just do it on people. And here's the problem. I remember a few years ago I was trying to tell someone about Reiki, and they didn't even believe me that such a thing was possible. They said, well, energy doesn't really come out of their hands. And I said, well, yeah, it does. And they actually stopped talking to me. They actually walked away like, okay, sure. And then they just, took off. And they wouldn't really talk to me after that. It was like if I believed that energy came out of somebody's hands, that, that's totally impossible. But energy healing is that you channel this energy into people. And Reiki is probably the widest known and widest practice of energy healing practiced. And the word is Japanese. We're going to get into the connotation, but there was a Dr. Usui in Japan that went up on top of a sacred mountain, sacred to Buddhism, and he meditated, the classic meditation practice. And he was hit in his forehead by a beam of light, and when he came off the mountain, he was able to do this, to channel this energy. And that sounds kind of far-fetched to a lot of people, but I was going to tell you the different levels. The first level, you can just do it on people. The second level, you can do it on people far away. I talked to a Reiki master that she was in London, and she did it on her father in New Zealand, and he could actually feel it. Now, people will tell you, people that have this done on them will tell you they can actually feel this energy, and sometimes it feels quite profound, like fire, like, really hot. So this is not psychosomatic. This is not something where you have to, imagine something like with the Reiki Alliance. It costs $10,000 to be a Reiki master. So if you pay $10,000 and you can't do this, and it was just psychosomatic, then there'd be all these lawsuits, right? Or you'd want your money back. And, you know, a lot of Reiki people do it for money. You know, it costs, you know, what, $65 an hour, you know, to have a Reiki session, or half an hour, something like that. So if it's psychosomatic and you don't feel anything, you're not going to pay, right? So the view is you're going to get something, you know, something's going to happen. So the third level is the master level. That's where you can initiate people into it. You know, you can actually seal this energy within them. Like I said, you don't learn it. It's not like becoming a doctor, engineer, something like that. You're actually, it's a mystical ceremony where you're initiated into it. This is the Reiki News magazine right here. And this is, a lot of people think that Reiki is non-religious, and, you know, it has no spiritual negativity to it, and it's really just something very positive and beneficial, and it can be compatible with Christianity. In fact, I found that here in Canada, I was speaking at a place in Manitoba, you know, in the central part of the country, and I found out that the Reiki practitioners in this particular town were members of the Baptist church, local Baptist church. Yeah.
Oh.
So, you know, obviously they would defend their use of it and say, well, you know, it's just like a science, or, you know, something like yoga. But in this magazine, which is obviously pro-Reiki, you know, this is not a critic saying this, it talks about, excuse me, in Japan, the word Reiki is not commonly associated with Dr. Isui's healing system at all. In other words, the word Reiki means something connected with this Dr. Isui. But in Japan, it's not. You know what it means? It says, but it's simply a generic word that refers to the occult. So in Japan, the word Reiki is just the generic word for what we would call here the occult.
Wow.
So why would, you know, why would Reiki have a connection with the occult? Well, this has to be discussed because huge numbers of people are doing Reiki around the world. It's become extremely popular. When I was in Calgary, you know, here in Canada, I was in Calgary here a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I talked to a woman who was an ex-Reiki channeler. I think she was even a master, I'm not sure, but she had gotten saved, you know, become an evangelical Christian and gotten out of it. And we talked, you know, and I wish I could reconnect with her. I told her I'd stay in touch with her, but I lost the card that she gave me. So if she's seeing this, I'd like for her to, you know, connect with me again, get a hold of me again. Because she was one of the few people I know that had come out of it. And she told me there were literally thousands of Reiki channelers in Calgary.
Wow.
Literally thousands.
Like McDonald's.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the people liked it. It was popular. You know, she would be in various public places and people would line up to feel this energy. Okay, when I was in Germany last August, I talked to a woman who had been a Reiki, just not a master, but just a Reiki channeler. And when we talked for about an hour. She again had been saved and, you know, come out of it, and she cried constantly. This whole time we were talking, she had tears coming down her face. You know, she was just crying incessantly. And she had been in it for 20 years. She had been a Reiki channeler for 20 years, and during this time she had done it on 500 people. 500 people during these 20 years. And she gave me some information. She had went to a German Reiki website, and according to this website, excuse me, I'm getting dry here. According to this website, there were between 600 and 700,000 Reiki channelers just in Germany. And 15,000, here's the heavy part, 15,000 Reiki masters. 15,000 people that were capable of initiating people into this.
That's an army.
I know, that's an army. 15,000 masters.
Wow.
And, you know, same way in Ireland. I found Reiki in little villages 200 miles from Dublin. There was one called Skeeter Bean, I think that's how you pronounce it. the people that were hosting me there, this couple, we had stopped in this little village to look for a place to eat. We were on our way to the coast in Ireland, you know, real scenic views there. And we stopped in this little village, and a market town, and we were looking for a place to eat. We stumbled across 3 places that did Reiki, just looking for a place to eat. We weren't even looking for Reiki centers, and they were called holistic centers, you know, or body, mind, spirit centers. And they said, you know, they listed all these things they did, and one of them was Reiki. You know, 3 places just in this one little. I mean, there could have been more. You know, we just found 3. Like, we're going along looking for a restaurant. Oh, look here, there's Reiki. You know, and they took pictures. You know, we have pictures of this. And this is 200 miles from Dublin. You know, in the County Cork. So Reiki is popular in Europe, in Canada, but in the U.S., okay, the man that the organization that puts this out, it's called the International Center for Reiki Training. And here's the whatever you call him, the
Contact person?
Yeah, the CEO or whatever. He estimated that in 2004 or 5 there were 1 million Reiki channelers in the U.S. William Lee Rand, he's the you might say, oh yeah, the president, the founder and president of the International Center for Reiki Training. Okay, in 2011, an article came out in Spiritual Directors International magazine called Presence. You know, the spiritual directors, people that are teaching spiritual formation in various settings, they have a magazine called Presence. And there was an article on Reiki and spiritual direction. Now, the woman there who wrote that, I can't remember her name, you could probably find it on the internet. This Presence magazine, Reiki and spiritual direction, she quoted William Lee Rand that by 2011 there were over 2 million Reiki channelers in the U.S. It went from 1 million to 2 million just between 2004 and 2011. Now it's growing at a very staggering rate. And I would encourage people that are viewing this and are skeptical, they can find, you know, local Reiki practitioners in their area and call them and verify that this is a big movement. But, you know, the occult, Reiki is the generic word for the occult. Okay, this is a book called The Healing Power of Reiki. And notice that the foreword is by Dr. Mehmet Oz, you know, who has the television program.
Very popular guy.
Now, the reason he endorses this book is because his wife is a Reiki master. Yeah, Lisa, his wife Lisa, is a Reiki master, and in her book, Us, she says that, you know, I am a certified Reiki master. So Dr. Oz says that, you know, they've been using Reiki in their family for years, and they swear by it. And in 2010, Dr. Oz told his audience that everyone who listens to his show should try Reiki in 2010. So Dr. Oz is a major proponent. But anyhow, this chapter 1, what Reiki, the woman's name is Raven Keys. And in chapter 1, she says what Reiki is and what sometimes comes with it. Well, what does come with it? Remember, we just saw that it's in Japan, it's the generic word for the occult.
Yeah.
Well, she says
Wow.
in this book, are you ready for this?
Yes.
What comes with it, you know? Okay, we all have the right to connect with our spirit guides. You know, spirit guides. So this is what comes with it, is spirit guides. Every person interested in Reiki can make a personal connection with a guide. This is a spirit who is the overseer of your Reiki experiences and is invaluable to those of us who practice Reiki. And she talks about your Reiki master in spirit is a powerful being on whom you can depend. I know that sounds kind of far out, but this is Dr. Oz, you know, promoting this book, wrote the foreword to it. Okay, having connected with your Reiki master in spirit will change you in profound ways. Trust yourself, capital S. Yourself is now activated by the power of what might be the most constant guide and guardian of your life. This has been true for me. So now you have this constant guide and guardian. And she says, I pray that it will be the same gift for you as you develop a relationship with your Reiki master in spirit. So in other words, by going to Reiki channelers, one can wind up with a spirit guide. And that's why Reiki is the generic word for the occult in Japan. Any comments here?
It opens up the same Pandora's box that all other aspects of the occult, now that you've pointed out what it means, occult, it's the same Pandora's box. It opens you up to all these other darker things within occultism.
Well, yeah, but the appeal again, like I got to say this: yoga and Reiki and all metaphysical healing systems are based on the same thing. There's this. It's not physical, but there's supposed to be this this system called the chakras. And if you go to any bookstore and go to the yoga section and start looking at the books, you're going to find diagrams of the chakras. And supposedly in meditation, these chakras are opened, causing this kundalini energy to rise. Now the 6 and 7 chakras are the ones that conflict most with evangelical Christianity. Because when the 6th chakra opens, that's called the third eye chakra, and that is when one has psychic powers. One is able to engage in like clairvoyance and things like that. And of course, that is hostile to biblical Christianity. In Deuteronomy 18 and other places, it talks about throughout the entire Bible, like Acts 16, a young girl who had a spirit of divination. Well, that's the same as with Reiki. The word occult means hidden or kept secret, because there's interaction with this supernatural realm, where these spirit guides dwell. And as in any occult system, the view is that you're God, man is divine. Probably my battle cry, my main verse is Leviticus 19:31. It says, "Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." Now the word wizard there, I know it sounds kind of like a cartoonish type thing. But in the Hebrew, the word wizard there is a knowing one. Wow. A knowing one. In other words, someone who has knowledge of these supernatural realms. And this is not something that is unique. I mean, this book, The Healing Power of Reiki, and the connection with the Reiki, the powerful beings that, will be your guide and companion. This is not just her, Raven Keyes. This is a Reiki publication. And it talks about the awareness that spiritual beings can help with the healing process and aid in healing sessions is something that many healers have experienced. This is especially true in the practice of Reiki. The most immediate example of this in Reiki healing sessions where many report an awareness of spiritual beings coming to help in the healing process. And some people can see them, have visions of these spirit helpers. And over here, it says, it is their intention, these spiritual beings, that we be completely healed and become enlightened also. They are present now and are available to anyone who lifts their mind and heart toward them. And when you engage in Reiki or go to a Reiki healer, you open a door that will allow their energies to be received by you in a more powerful way. And they can join with you when you give Reiki treatments. When you have a Reiki treatment, then they join with you. So in essence, this is the same type of thing we find with yoga, that there's these spirit guides, spirit helpers that are connected to you. Now this is, like I said, it wouldn't, it'd be one thing if this was just something that was obscure. Like, you know, there were handfuls of people that did this here and there. But, you know, like say there were like 3,000 in the U.S. or something like that, then you could say that, you know, being concerned about this was frivolous, you know, or sensationalistic. But all over the world, this is going on. Like, this is from a Reiki magazine. You can see here, there's this Reiki master named Marie Hall, and you can see her picture here, and the audience will be able to see this. And she moved to the Czech Republic somewhere back in the 90s. And you can see her first class. You can see these are regular people here in this Reiki class. You know, average, normal-looking people. I mean, they don't look like goths or social misfits or somebody who would be antisocial. You know, these look like your neighbors, your family members.
Yeah.
And this is the first Reiki class she did, and these people were being initiated into. Well, Marie Hall went on to initiate 45,000 people all over Europe.
Wow.
And, I mean, not did it on them, initiated people to do it on others. And she did this in France, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, Greece, Cyprus, Croatia, Norway, England, Scotland, Ireland. 45,000 people were initiated into Reiki in these, okay, and she's not, I mean, there were, like I said, one Reiki master did this. One Reiki master did this. There are 15,000 Reiki masters in Germany alone, not counting, you know, the rest of Europe. So if just one master can initiate 45,000 people, this is over the course of 13 years, of course, 13 years. If each one of these goes on to do it on 500 people, like this woman I talked to in Germany, we're talking, you know, you get the picture, we're talking 45,000 people doing it on just 100 people. That would be 45 million people.
Wow.
I know.
Wow. All over the world?
Well, in Europe, these countries I just mentioned. But like I said, you know, Reiki is huge all over the world, in thousands of Reiki channelers in Calgary. Probably the same is true here in Vancouver, Toronto, certainly in the U.S. I encountered Reiki in this small town out in the middle of nowhere in Iowa.
Wow.
It was 130 miles from Des Moines. It had about, I can't remember, I think it had 5,000 people, and it was your typical all-American town. And there was a, you know, the town square. I was there, and I was at a Calvary Chapel church there, and we went downtown to eat, you know, the central part of town to eat, and there was a massage place there. I mean, a therapeutic, not a massage parlor, but a therapeutic massage place, you know, a legitimate one, and it said Reiki on the sign. You know, a lot of massage therapists have gotten into Reiki. So we're going to look at some other forms of this. It's not just Reiki. There's 65 different methods of this type of thing, of energy healing. Okay, one that's probably a lot of people have heard of is called therapeutic touch, and that's widely used in hospitals by nurses.
Yeah.
And that's based on the chakras.
Unbeknownst to a lot of the patients too.
Yeah, unbeknownst. That's right, I was talking about the chakras. I was talking about the third eye chakra, but the crown chakra, the seventh one, when that one is activated, then you know that you are God. And that's what I'm trying to get across, that this paradigm shift, the Aquarian Conspiracy, that, you know, I borrowed that because I borrowed the term because, one, it's accurate. You know, it is, Marilyn Ferguson saw it as a benign conspiracy or a good conspiracy. Because, you know, in other words, she knew that you had to kind of get people's defenses down, because they would not be open to mystical, paranormal type things without having something to neutralize the fear. People would either be scared or skeptical. If you went up to somebody and said, yeah, I'm going to do Reiki on you, and there's spirit guides connected to this, and you go, oh, that's okay, I don't want that, you know, no thanks. But if you didn't tell them and, you know, made it sound like, yeah, I can heal your back pain, or I can heal your arthritis, or I can heal your, you know, chronic fatigue or whatever, then they will share anything that helps. But, you know, therapeutic touch, another one called healing touch, is connected with the chakras. They're all connected with the chakras. In fact, the woman that came up with therapeutic touch, her name was Dolores Krieger, and she was a nurse in New York, and she admits that it has a quote-unquote high occult factor because of the chakras. Anything connected to the chakras is connected to occultism.
Wow.
So then there's something called healing touch, which is a spin-off from therapeutic touch. But there's others. There's something called, like I said, 65 different modalities. There's something called quantum touch. And again, that's connected to the chakras. And it all has to do with this energy coming out of it. There's something called the reconnection. And that was started by a guy named Dr. Eric Pearl, I think. Dr. Eric Pearl. And again, you know, it's you're being reconnected with, you know, the divine essence of the universe. Excuse me. Okay, the way this is growing, you know, like the reconnection, started out, you know, I follow these things in magazines. Started out there's like 10,000, then there's 25,000, and there's 35,000, then there's 40,000, and there's 50,000, and there's 60,000. Now there's 100,000. So there's constantly people being trained
Wow.
in these things. There's another one, there's something called Eden Energy Medicine, named after a woman named Donna Eden. And again, you know, it starts out with a certain number, and now they're up to 80,000. You know, she came out with a book here a few years ago, and there were 40,000 who had been trained. Now there's 80,000. And see, it's going to keep going and going and going. It's not going to, you know, it's not going to hit some certain plateau and then stop. Same thing with Reiki. It's not like in 2004, okay, I remember back in the late 90s seeing, you know, 1 million Reiki channelers, 1.5 million in the world. And I haven't seen anything in the world, but I think there was 500,000 in the U.S., and then it hit 1 million, you know, according to William Lee Rand, it hit 1 million, and then in 2011, you know, 2 million, you know, 3, 4, I mean, it's going to keep growing. People are going to have to, the main reason for these talks, these YouTube things we're doing, is to allow people to make up their minds what they're going to do about this. You know, are they going to stick with traditional Christianity? Are they going to stick with the preaching of the cross? Are they going to stick with the gospel? Or are they going to be part of this new paradigm where, you know, God is in everybody? Okay, here we have something called pranic healing. This is another thing that is popular. People are being trained in this. Communities all over the world. Pranic healing is another thing. You can see the hands there.
Yeah.
Energy. And now we're going to look at something called the Oneness blessing. This is, again, the book Natural Awakening, and they have an article here, an article on the Oneness blessing, see? And this is like a form of Reiki, but where Reiki can, you know, you can go to a Reiki channeler and they'll do it on you for half an hour, an hour. This only takes 2 minutes. You know, one person can do it on somebody for, I mean, a lot of people, like 50 people, just in a couple of hours, because you just put your hands on for 2 minutes.
They're transferring that occultic power to different
And
people.
it says the Oneness blessing is essentially a transfer of intelligent or divine energy from a blessing giver to a blessing receiver. And this is, it is from this point that an evolutionary awakening of consciousness takes place. And they said it can be done with a hands-on method, you know, as Reiki, but it can also be done through the eyes. You can just look at people and impact them. It can be done through the eyes.
That's really unusual.
Yeah, and it says tens of millions of people have probably received the Oneness blessing. And this is precipitating a global shift in consciousness. This is what we're talking about. You know, this can be checked out.
Can you say that it's akin to sorcery in some ways?
Yeah, biblically, you know, the term sorcery, there's a lot of terms for it. Wizard, sorcery, I know a lot of people would roll their eyes, but originally, in the Bible, there's all sorts of references to people with occult powers. You know, Simon the Sorcerer in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
You know, people like that.
Yeah.
You know, the young girl possessed by a spirit of divination. In you know, the Hebrew scriptures, Deuteronomy 18, that to put this in perspective, in in Canaan, you know, when the Israelites went into Canaan, this was the practices done by the people there in these different countries there in Canaan. They were involved in contact with familiar spirits. Well, anyhow, there's something about the oneness blessing that people need to understand. This is a gentleman named Tony. This is Fortune magazine. You've heard of Fortune magazine. And there's this motivational speaker named Tony Robbins, and he is a oneness blessing giver. And the title here is The CEO Whisperer. The CEO Whisperer. You've heard like the horse whisperer. Well, Tony Robbins has become a mentor to some of the top CEOs in the world. You know, captains of industry.
Great.
And now this really is hard to accept. This is really weird. Have you heard of something called Salesforce? Does that ring a bell?
Not till now.
Well, apparently there's this company called Salesforce, and they have this annual conference put on, and they're a software powerhouse, it says here. This is Fortune magazine, you know. And every year they put on this exhibition called Dreamforce. Okay? And this is what I can't believe. It's called the Lollapalooza of corporate gatherings. But 150,000 registered attendees, you know, now it has to be online. It can't be just in one spot, because it says there's 1,400 sessions, and there's 150,000 registered attendees.
Wow.
It has to be online, because it says it's in San Francisco there, because there's only 750,000 people in San Francisco. You can't have 150,000 people being there in person. But anyhow, 150,000 people are somehow connected to this Dreamforce thing. And it says that, that Tony Robbins is one of the important mentors for this gathering. It says, few of any self-improvement gurus are as familiar to Americans as Robbins, but somewhat more quietly over the years, he has assumed a different role as trusted advisor to corporate chieftains and captains of finance. You know, the top leaders of the business world. And these are global power players. You know, these are not just American. They're global. In other words, they're in charge of the world's corporate structure. But in this article here, it talks about how Tony Robbins is a oneness blessing giver, and he even did it on the person that wrote this article. It says that he heard from a friend who had traveled to this Oneness University. You have to go to India to get this. So they went to this Oneness University, and I think they were there for like several weeks, and they learned how to do this. And at first he was skeptical. You know, he said, is this really going to do anything? So he was skeptical. But eventually the guru took him and showed him that there was something real here. This was a power, and he became a oneness blessing giver. It's called Diksha in Hinduism. Diksha, and it actually says that it like changes your brain, and so he now gives this to people at his seminars. So if you can actually do this just by looking at someone, as it says in this, and 150,000 people or watch this, Tony Robbins could actually impact 150,000 people, you know, just over the course of however long this lasted.
It's amazing.
I know. So you can see that this, and these
What
would
an
be
influence.
these people would be shakers and movers.
Yeah.
Well, this is from a website by a man named Morton Toble, Tolboll, or is it Ull? Anyhow, Morton Tobel, and the name of the website is A Critique of the Indian Oneness Movement and Its Use of Western Success Coaching. And it gives a list of people that are either Oneness Blessing givers or are connected to it. Some of these are quite interesting. Some of the actors, Jim Carrey, the actor, you know, the comedian, Melanie Griffith, Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, you know, very prominent actor, Lindsay Wagner, Dennis Quaid, okay, political leaders, Vicente Fox, President of Mexico, you know, the President of Sri Lanka, the President of Indonesia, that's one of the most populous countries in the world, and the Vice President of Bolivia is actually a Oneness Blessing giver. And then Wayne Dyer, you know, Jack Canfield of the, Marcy Shimoff, who does the chicken soup for the woman's soul. Jack Canfield, who puts out the, remember we mentioned him earlier, he was the one that had a spiritual awakening in the yoga class, you know, in college. But Tony Robbins here, Oneness Blessing giver. But here's the one that gets me the most. This one is the most significant. You need to find out the name of this person. But religious leaders, it says Vatican representatives, including the Pope's chief archivist and personal secretary. So I would encourage people to check this out to find out who he is. And it doesn't say he's a Oneness Blessing giver, but he's involved with the Oneness Blessing movement. You know, the Pope's chief archivist and personal secretary. So that's significant.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going to end here with something that I feel kind of sums up what we're talking about. There was a woman who did this named Elizabeth K. Stratton, who did this chakra-based healing thing. And she did an autobiography called Touching Spirit. And this shows how this can infiltrate organizations or, you know, places where people go for health reasons. She says, I was invited by the Catholic Health Association to speak at its annual convention. Excuse me. They asked whether I could lead a half-day workshop on laying on of hands. Now, keep in mind, she was a metaphysical healer. So she says there were 1,200 people registered for this convention. This is the Catholic Health Association. So these are people who were involved with hospitals. And she thought that she expected maybe 200-300 people to be there, you know, at her workshop. Well, she says, by the time I arrived, there were 650 people in my workshop, and it had to be held in the main ballroom of the hotel. I was stunned. I was stunned.
Wow.
She said there were clergy from all denominations, Catholic and Protestant there. She says, as I started looking around more carefully, I noticed many priests in collar and sisters in habit. And she started to get worried. She said, I decided I would probably be burned at the stake right there on stage when she started doing this, or talking about it. I waited for the attack. It never came. It never came. And she said she was being careful not to use the word psychic in any way. So she started to take them through meditation. She started to lead them in meditation. And while she was doing this, she said, I was sure someone would come up with a scathing attack. No one did. No one did. Everyone seemed generally hungry for information about healing. Many people described moving and powerful experiences during the meditation. Relief. I mean, that was a separate, you know, in other words, she was relieved. She said relief. In other words, she thought when we're going to do meditation now, close your eyes and hold on, isn't this occultism? Isn't this, you know, new age? Mm-hmm. It never came, you know, relief. She said, so after it was over, people started talking to her. She said that a priest in his 70s and a woman of about the same age with a back problem had told her they felt heat you know, from their hands and white light flowing through their body. So in other words, this heat actually was, you know, there was a contact with a supernatural force. Okay, they wanted to know how the 650 people, they wanted to know how they could take this healing technique back to their congregations and hospital patients. And, you know, some of them said they wanted to use this in their private pastoral counseling sessions, you know, when you counsel people. I left St. Louis that afternoon aware that something momentous had happened. There really was a grassroots revolution in the churches, and I was part of it. I flew from St. Louis to Louisville, Kentucky to talk with a group of hospital administrators from the Sisters of Nazareth hospital system, made up of 7 hospitals over several states. So this was basically, you know, a chakra-based New Age healing system that 650 people at this convention had embraced. You know, they had actually felt something. And they were taking it back to, you know, counsel people with their use in their health settings. But this was not compatible with traditional Christianity.
Just the opposite.
Yeah, just the opposite.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to talk to people about, that even though they may be nice, like you saw in that picture, even though these people may be, you know, really nice people in the sense of how you gauge social niceness,
Yeah.
they carry a, you know, a message that comes from the Reiki guides, you know, from spirit guides.
But it's like, I think they're unaware of it, aren't they? In the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
they're
Well,
taken in.
certainly the people
like
that
sheep among wolves.
Yeah, the people that do this, they would not see these spirit guides as being bad. They would see them as being helpful or benign or even beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem: when people that movie The Exorcist, people when they hear certain words, they think of The Exorcist, where you got heads spinning, and, you know, really grotesque. But the way, this is what I want to get across, the way you have to gauge this is through the lens of the gospel.
Yeah.
You know, there's a verse in Corinthians, Paul says, Satan comes as an angel of light, and his ministers also transform themselves as the ministers of righteousness.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem that's bugged me. I asked myself once, well, do Satan's ministers know they're Satan's ministers? Because people that actually use the word Satan, a good example would be Marilyn Manson. You're familiar with him, Marilyn Manson?
Yeah.
He doesn't transform himself as the minister of righteousness. You know, he promotes his music and his videos, and the things he promotes are not things that you would call righteous. So I would say that Satan's ministers don't really know that they're Satan's ministers.
Mm-hmm.
I would think maybe at some level they may know that this conflicts with the Christian gospel, but they would see themselves as being on the side of that which is good.
They're really deceived.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real deception.
And I would encourage people to see this, not to dismiss it out of hand.
Yeah.
You know, to really weigh.
Well, it has to do with eternal life.
Yeah, with it, you know, with eternal life or not.
Yeah.
And at the end of this, we're going to get into the more evangelical aspects of this. But I want to make sure people understand that this is a movement that's all over the world, and there's millions of people involved, you know, yoga and energy healing, and that it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's not a fad, and it's real. It's real. When people have spiritual experiences in yoga and energy healing, it's not their imagination.